The Pro consoles are coming, but should Xbox be joining the party? PlayStation 5 Pro, but should there be a theoretical Xbox Series X Pro? There's some interesting information that I think is worth diving into that should help kind of unlock, if you will, or bring to surface whether or not Microsoft should or should not be releasing a Series X Pro console. Now, we know the PS5 Pro is going to be coming this holiday season, and there's going to be some perf bump there. For sure, that's what makes it Pro. About a 10% CPU bump. There's going to be notable GPU bumps. But at the end of the day, it's the PS5 Pro. It's going to be coming this holiday. And the question becomes, should Xbox be building a Series X Pro? Now, there's some historical information here that we can really kind of dive into that will help us better understand whether or not this actually makes sense. Because, hey, if PlayStation's dropping a new Pro console, gosh darn it, Xbox should be too. But, really, should they be? Because, well, let's just kind of dive into it here. Because what is the goal of a Pro console at the end of the day, the PlayStation 5 Pro or a theoretical Xbox Series X Pro? Is it to expand the growing user base of a console, right? Is that the goal, is to increase the ecosystem? Or is it to simply sell more hardware, but most of that hardware, if not all of it, is going to existing customers? So let's just dive in here, because Xbox has data that we unfortunately don't have access to, but we can kind of dig through here. So let's just dig into this here. Last generation Xbox obviously had the Xbox One. In mid-cycle, they released the Xbox One X. From that, Microsoft is able to determine, now granted, it's a sample size of roughly one, but it's not perfect, but at least it's pretty good data and it's directly from their customers. They can determine if you were a new customer brought in or you simply upgrading. You're like, Brad, well, how would they do that? So let's just use my own example. So I had an Xbox One. I ended up buying an Xbox One X, and I logged into it with the same account. And so they can say, look, Brad had an Xbox One, and we sold him an Xbox One X. We made him happy. He saw the value, so he bought the console. That's a good thing. However, the narrative for Xbox specifically has changed over the last, 24, 36 months, where Microsoft is saying, we want to sell more subscriptions into Game Pass. Game Pass is how you should judge us, not buy our hardware. And if you go off of that sort of concept, that Microsoft wants to grow the ecosystem and not necessarily the console base. Now, don't say that Microsoft doesn't want to sell consoles. That's not true. But if they look at the data and they say, look, the vast majority of people who bought the Xbox One X were existing customers, and all we did was move them from one Xbox to another. We didn't actually grow the base of our customers, right? It's just the same users just buying it. Phil Spencer is famous for saying the console generation, the people that buy consoles, grows by 1 year every year, meaning the population of people that buy consoles isn't really changing. They're just getting older, and we just continue to buy the same console because that's what we do. And so put yourself into the world, into the shoes of Xbox, right? They have this Scorpio data that we would think would tell them that, hey, a Pro console doesn't actually attract new users. We can justify that. However, we know that PlayStation Pro is going to launch this fall. And so what are we going to do, right? This is a decision that had to have been made years ago. This is not something like in October, nope. We'll just go build a diskless these are decisions that have been made. And there's some things that help us understand that that decision has been made a long time ago. Specifically, the Brooklyn console. Remember this thing? I shouldn't even say remember this thing. Everybody remembers this thing. It's from the FCC leak earlier this year, late last year, when Microsoft was trying to buy Activision. Microsoft accidentally, or the judge accidentally, made these slides public. However, these slides were not new. They were relatively old by our standards, but in the world of console building, they're fresh off the deck, if you will. Even back then, a couple years ago, Microsoft was looking at it, saying, look, we don't need a Pro console. When we do a refresh, we'll make it round, we'll make it more efficient, but we'll also remove the disk drive. We'll potentially try to make it cheaper, although the price point says $499. We don't really know where that price point is going to land, especially if a PS5 Pro does come. The whole point of this entire image on the screen is to show you that Microsoft building a diskless version of the Xbox Series X has been on the radar for a long time, not a Pro model, which to me says that they looked at their own information and said, look, the Xbox One X didn't do anything for us. Like, it helped us give a nice little marketing message, but at the end of the day, our console base stayed the same. We didn't grab any new market share. So why should we invest in building a slightly faster version of the X and then have to go through those marketing hoops to try to get users to buy it? And then when they do buy it, we're only selling to our same base. We haven't grown the Xbox ecosystem, which is why we see this thing, I believe. The Xbox Series X, the white version that doesn't have a disk drive. I know you can't see it in this image. I grabbed the wrong one. I grabbed the backside, which just shows it's the ports, but we all know that the white version that is coming this fall will not have a disk drive. And so that Microsoft has clearly, I think, made the decision that a Pro doesn't necessarily make sense right now, because it doesn't fit into the ecosystem of what Microsoft is trying to accomplish, which is grow the Xbox user base community. And how do you grow the Xbox user base community? It's quite candidly, I believe, lowering prices across the board, which Microsoft hasn't been able to do really this generation. There has been some price cuts on the Series S, but at the end of the day, if Microsoft sits down and says, I'm going to invest money into the Xbox ecosystem, how can I get the biggest bang for my return? I even kind of hinted at this on Twitter. I put this poll up late yesterday and said, you are running Xbox and you have $100 million to spend to improve the Xbox ecosystem. What are you doing? I think the results here, now granted, this is at the time of when I captured the screenshot, there was only 6,000 or 6,500, we'll round there, respondents. But look at the data here, and this is kind of where my head is at, because it says more games, the Game Pass, would actually be more favorably looked upon than an Xbox Series X Pro, 40%. Granted, buy a new studio and the Series X Pro are roughly tied, I mean, within a few percentage points, definitely rounding error. Surprisingly low were the Elite Series 3 controller and a new Elite Series headset. But I think this is kind of the point that I'm trying to get at here, is that a Pro console doesn't move the dial for the brand. People just want games at the end of the day. They want those true next-gen games, and the experience of a Pro piece of hardware isn't quite there. And so when we look at, hey, what is Microsoft doing? We got the PlayStation 5 Pro coming, and I think this graph and sort of everything else that Microsoft has shown so far or leaked really kind of cements the picture that the Pro console for Xbox doesn't really make sense at the end of the day. And someone's going to look at this and say, Brad, it's only $100 million. I made that number up. So I would actually expect, and this is kind of where my head was at when I was doing this, I actually expect it's a lot more money to build a Series X Pro than $100 million, which sounds like an insane amount of money. But when you think about, first off, this had to have started years ago. Like, this isn't something they can't just turn the clock speed up, because they've already done that by now. They have to take the whole thing in consideration. And then you have to consider the marketing expenditures. Then you have to consider just quite literally going to China and getting these things built, getting them shipped, getting them put in stores, getting them put next to your other consoles. And then you have all these SKUs out in there and things get muddled. And so $100 million, I bet actually if it was only $100 million, they probably would do it. I bet it's significantly more than that. And someone say, Brad, why wouldn't they just build a handheld? Why didn't you put that option here? I actually tagged it below the tweet. There's no way on earth Microsoft could build a Series X or an Xbox handheld for $100 million. I would actually peg that number probably close to $1 billion. And people, again, will say, Brad, how is that insanely possible? $1 billion to build a handset? Well, it's got to start literally years ago. Then they have to build up the whole supply chain. Remember, Microsoft doesn't have a handheld, so they have to go find the factory. They have to go get the molds. They have to go get every single component lined up. They have to do all that work. And so it would be expensive to go build a handheld. And theoretically, $100 million. It's like, what could Microsoft do to improve things? And I think it comes back to just games. That's what people are clamoring for, are just games. And so I don't think Microsoft is going to do an Xbox Series X Pro just based on sort of the leaks that we've had. Now, and leaks, the FCC stuff is not a leak. I mean, this is a matter of fact, legitimate Microsoft slide at one point. And again, there's no recommendations here of performance gains, just slight modifications to the existing console with some newer Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. But again, we're not seeing a 20% perf gain in the CPU. We're not seeing an NPU added to this. This is not a generational change. This isn't even really, it's just a minor spec bump or refresh, if you will, rather than a Pro console. And so Yeah, I don't think we're going to see a Pro. I don't think Microsoft has really given us any indication that there is going to be a Pro. We've heard rumors that we're only a couple years away from potentially another refresh or a new generation, right? Sarah Bond has already said we're all in on consoles and we're going to do AI stuff, and like those memos have leaked out over by Jez, and so that's kind of where people keep asking me, where is the Xbox Series X Pro, the One X of this generation, and I don't think we're going to see it. I don't think we're going to see it. However. Because it's why not. What would a Series X Pro look like? I think it might look like something like this. I think they throw some RGB in there, nice classy RGB. But yeah, I think that is. I think that's where it's at. Because Microsoft, at the end of the day, they don't have a great history with hardware. Hardware has low margins. Microsoft is a high margin company. They're building the software, and yeah, we will see. We will see. But now, every time somebody asks, I say, Brad, where's the Xbox Series X Pro rumors? I now have a video to link them to. So, as always, my friends, make sure to keep it subscribed here because only BS on this channel is me.